Welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Jose.
I'm Mike.
Okay, so we've just come back from seeing The Disaster Artist, directed by James Franco and starring James Franco.
And his brother Dave.
So a family operation, not as a Wellesian as Tommy Wiseau's The Room, but getting there almost.
The Disaster Artist, what do you think?
Well, several things, really. I think James Franco is extraordinary. And he's a pleasure to watch, and he's both touching and he's really funny. He lands all the jokes. I don't think much of the movie. I think it's kind of a mistake that an actor as gifted as he is doing all these thousands of projects, including this one, which are not very well thought through, and an actor of his quality doesn't just put himself in the hands of a great director, which is really what, in my view, he should be doing, because he is extraordinary. I didn't think much of the film, though actually I laughed a lot throughout it.
You did laugh an awful lot.
Yeah.
And I laughed quite a bit as well, not as much as you. And actually, interestingly, we laughed at different points.
Yes, we did.
So it seems to have a couple of gears to it, to its humour, I guess.
Yes.
I basically found it quite banal. And not the worst film in the world, because that's The Room, but it's kind of milquetoast, and it has its moments, but I think it's telling the story in the wrong way. It's got the wrong opinion of it. So
what do you think it does, and what do you think it should do?
The way it's bookended really sets me off. I came out of the film in quite a bad mood because of the last 10 minutes or so. Whereas actually I'd had a reasonable time, the rest of it. So it opens with talking heads of a load of actors, like Kristen Bell and Kevin Smith, the director, who are talking about The Room. They have these things, and it's supposed to set it up as a kind of ironic, this film was great because what Tommy was doing, he wanted to change the world. That's what they're all saying. And obviously they're talking about The Room, which is popularly considered the worst film ever made.
No.
He made it on his own dime. Somehow he had $6 million. No one knew who this guy was. He's got a weird accent. He's from Eastern Europe somewhere, though he claims he's an all-American guy from New Orleans. And he made this terrible film that has since become a cult thing that plays on midnight circuits. They play it every month in London, I think.
Yes.
And huge crowds go there, and there's something about spoons, and they throw a football around. And it's a huge joke. And Tommy Wiseau maintains that this was intended as a joke. Clearly, that is a lie.
Yes.
And he wanted it to be, this kind of great American melodrama, and it just wasn't. Anyway, so the Disaster Artist opens up with people talking about this, and then it goes into the story of how it was made. And Greg Sestero is this kind of wannabe actor, played by Dave Franco, who meets Tommy at an acting class. And they kind of form a partnership, and they move to LA because Tommy has an apartment there.
Yes.
And eventually, when they're kind of being turned down all the time, they go, let's make a movie of our own.
Yes.
And Tommy's creative vision comes into being. Blah, blah, blah. They make a movie. It all goes very bad. Relationships sort of fall apart. And then right at the end, at the premiere, everyone's laughing at it. Like, they realise this film is terrible. After a period of going, what? Really?
What is going on?
What's going on? They realise it's so bad, it's good, and start laughing at it. And Tommy storms off because he's upset about that. But he's convinced by Greg that you've made people happy. Look at the great time they're having.
Yes.
And when the film finishes, he goes up on stage to rapturous applause and says, "Thank you for seeing my comedy movie. I'm glad you liked it."
Yes.
And the film ends with this fucking so self-indulgent thing of how the Disaster Artist people have recreated a lot of the scenes from The Room.
Yes.
And they play them side by side for no purpose whatsoever. It's so self-indulgent.
Well, there's one purpose. It's to show how accurate the reproduction is to the original.
So what?
Well, that's an achievement of its own.
It's not. It's so self-indulgent. It has no impact on anything in the movie, and it takes such a long time. And it's purely a fan thing.
Yes, it is. But that's okay. I mean, I think the fan thing is... Well, let me rephrase it. I also think it's too long, and I also think it's self-indulgent. But there are reasons for that, and one is to show the accuracy, which actually is quite amazing, to the extent to which they've reproduced the original.
But it doesn't come to any part in the actual body of the film. All these scenes happen right at the end.
I know. But still. And the other thing is to acknowledge that very fandom, which, I find kind of, well, not bizarre, because, it's not anything one hasn't seen before.
No, it happens with like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, right?
Well, I was thinking more of the guy who directed Nine from Outer Space or whatever it's called.
Plan 9 from Outer Space,
yeah.
Ed Wood.
Ed Wood, yeah. Who Burton did the film on.
I was thinking of it more in terms of the way people go to the screenings in costume, they recite the lines, that sort of thing. That's like Rocky Horror.
Okay, yes. But people also had a cult following of Ed Wood. People would go to Ed Wood films to laugh at them. And actually, there's something about all of that I find deeply unpleasant. Kind of to go someplace to laugh at people being bad is not.
No, it's unpleasant.
It kind of.
I personally don't think a film. I tried to watch The Room the other day because I hadn't seen it before, in preparation for this.
Yes.
And I couldn't make it through 10 minutes.
Yes.
Well, maybe 15. But I just thought this is actually. There's no such thing as so bad it's good. It's just bad. I think it's so adolescent. Like, I remember being a kid and watching Plan 9 from Outer Space and laughing at how everything was on strings and how Bela Lugosi, died and they changed into another character who just covered his face and all that trivia stuff. It was entertaining when I was 15.
Yes.
But not now.
Well, the thing is that obviously it's got a cult following, and people love watching it. But I do think. I don't know. I mean, I can't say really because I haven't participated in any of these screenings myself. So I can't say for sure. But the idea is one that I find unpleasant.
Yeah.
That you're just going with a superior attitude to laugh at something, at somebody being bad or doing a shoddy job or like kind of and. I don't know what feelings it incites in people, but to me, kind of, there's a kind of a smugness about the reception of it, really, and a kind of a superiority and so on that I find kind of sad, really. Anyways,
I think the ending of The Disaster Artist, and the way, as you say, it acknowledges the fandom, and it basically it is a fan project. In terms of the actual refilming of those scenes, restaging of them, and showing them at the end side by side, that's a pure fan project.
Yes.
And the people who've made this film are fans.
Yes.
And I think that's the central problem with it, actually, because this film ends up framing the entire making of The Room as follow your dreams.
Yes.
These two guys followed their dreams, and you know what? They got a film made.
Yes.
And actually, I think it would be so much more interesting if the film was going, you know what? Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Which is the advice.
There's an element of that. And
well, that's the
Judd
advice,
Apatow, I think, plays the producer.
Well, that's right. That's the advice he gives.
But the film ends up not saying that. The film ends up saying, they did something great ultimately, even if it wasn't what they meant.
Yeah, they did
and
something.
I think it needs to be a lot darker than that.
Well, my response is when you can throw 6 million around, it's not difficult to do something, right? Like, actually, but kind of what you expect is that you do something good with 6 million, right? Like, any idiot can do something with 6 million, right? Like, so I think kind of that's where the whole thing about the film falls apart, and this thing about, like, following your dream and so on. And, what it does do, which I also find unpleasant on many levels, is, of course, it kind of... It doesn't just hint, it kind of layers on the fact that the Tommy Wiseau character has a huge crush on Greg, right? Which, is kind of interesting, I suppose, on one level, but it's kind of creepy on another. And it's rendered even more creepy with the casting of Dave Franco in the part, which makes it, on top of it, kind of incestuous, really,
I think, well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack, isn't there? Not that it matters, but I don't think that's something the film intends. I think the film wants to mine that for a bit of comedy, but I don't think it really means it in any serious way. But that's not to say that it doesn't come across. I didn't read it in that way.
Oh well, it's told to us all over, over and over and over again, right? Like, the notion of baby face, and how the mother initially reads that, and then how various people read this thing about baby face. It's clearly like implied, that this is revelatory of Tommy's true interest in Greg. I found that to be like almost overlaid, really. Like, yeah, well, you see Greg with a girlfriend and the problems that causes.
Sure, yeah, that's
Tommy,
true.
and you never see Tommy, who's the hero of the story, with any love interest, and of course, there's
Of course, he doesn't know where a vagina.
He doesn't know where a vagina is, and
Sure.
blah blah blah. It's almost like it's so overdetermined, really.
Yeah, I suppose, but it comes to nothing ultimately.
No,
That's part of
it comes to nothing, but to me it adds a layer of unpleasantness, really. But anyway, I also thought the filmmaking was really amateurish, right? Like, all that constantly moving camera and, the jiggy camera and so on. You could understand it if it was when they were filming and it was meant to be really bad. But actually, that's James Franco's style in it, altogether. So I do wish that he would just put himself in like other people's hands, really. He's a disaster on his own, kind of. Like everything he touches turns to shit, really. The only times that he's been really great is with a really good director, It made me laugh a lot, but it is banal. But actually, I think within this movie, there is, to me, evidence of really how great James Franco is. I found him actually both funny and touching, and kind of all of the choices that he made as an actor were like so fascinating. And it wasn't just like, a crude imitation. I think there was kind of like real feeling, really, in it. It kind of, you felt sad for him, really. So
no,
I think... Didn't you?
I didn't feel sad for Tommy, no.
Oh,
I felt sad for Greg because I think Greg needed to be wiser. And so when he gets offered this role by Bryan Cranston, playing himself as Bryan Cranston when he was in Malcolm in the Middle, this is in the early 2000s, and he says, "You've got beards, you're an actor, come be on Malcolm in the Middle for 3 days."
That's stupid, isn't it? That's just like sheer stupidity.
And he turns it down because Tommy says, "If we need you to shave your beard on this day, I'm not going to move it for you." And it is stupid that he doesn't take the role.
Yeah, well, Tommy doesn't want him to have an existence or a career without him.
Exactly.
So
I felt bad for Greg, and angry at Greg at that point, but bad for him that he was so subsumed by Tommy.
Yes.
He allowed himself to be.
Anyway, it's very interesting because, when you see at the end the characters side by side, James Franco has done and his makeup people have done an incredible job of making him look like Tommy Wiseau. But then, obviously, there's no way that you could make David Franco look like Greg. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Greg seems to be like 6 foot and red haired, like
Yeah.
So.
But it's not hugely important that he looks like Greg. He just needs to be vaguely handsome.
Yeah.
Which he is.
Yes, vaguely though.
Not your type.
Well, no. But kind of. I can only speak for myself. I don't think he's very handsome. Yeah. Anyway, it kind of sets up an interesting dynamic, which is different than what you imagine happens with Tommy Wiseau and Greg, because I think the fact of one being kind of quite dark and the other one being like red haired is to me interesting in an American context, whereas of course Dave Franco just looks like a kind of a shorter, slighter version of James, really.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that made the film so interesting is that there were all these very interesting cameos. The first one was Melanie Griffith, who plastic surgery has rendered so unrecognizable, that I only recognized her from her voice, her very distinctive kind of Betty Boop voice, which, I found a bit kind of interesting, really. And then Sharon Stone appears, and actually it was wonderful to see her in movies.
I didn't recognize her.
Oh, well, yeah. I think movies have missed her. She's great. And the other person that I thought was interesting to see there is Josh Hutcherson, kind of playing like a really interesting kind of supporting part as, one of the people in the movie.
The young lad.
Yeah, so, and that was a proper role. It wasn't just like a, cameo appearance like Zac Efron, really. So he certainly, and it was lovely to see Megan Mullally, and so on. So he certainly got a cast going.
He's got mates.
Yeah, he's got mates, who are putting out for him, really. And so kind of that was nice to see. Though again, it doesn't really add up to much,
No.
And actually, I think it was interesting that we were in the cinema because, if it's something that I had caught on Netflix, I would just have switched off after the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think I agree.
So...
the other thing is, I'm not interested in The Room, really. I mean...
Yes,
I think this is a film that if you like The Room, then you'll sit through it because it's a film about your favourite film.
I know, but a colleague of mine who taught it this year, who showed it to the students loved it, and they loved the whole discussion that kind of came out of that, and the so bad it's good argument, and
I think everything people want to talk about The Room is about that, though. It's all that extra stuff. Like, you can't actually talk about the film.
Yeah,
the film's terrible, and there's no point even trying to talk about what are the themes and what's the story, and you don't talk about that. You talk about all the extra stuff. Why is this film popular?
Yeah.
The kind of the social sort of the way people react to it in the world.
Did you get the sense that the dream to be creative and for self-expression and and so on was a real one in the film, or did you just get the sense that he was hot for Greg and that's it, really? I
think the film tells more than it shows. I think I didn't feel it through anything that the characters did, really. Every scene was really just being played for some sort of laugh. Well, certainly on the set of The Room. The way that Tommy's treating the cast and the crew and all that sort of stuff. But then they'll in conversation, the characters will say to each other, this my movie. I want to whatever it is. This human behaviour. I make great movie, and you go like. So you're telling me that this is what you want. You're telling me you want to be a star. You're telling me you want to make a great movie. The film doesn't actually express it or anything.
No, it doesn't. And actually, I don't know. Like, it could have done something about this egomaniac who had too much money and too little sense and didn't know what was going on or what was happening, and actually wasn't open to the creative process because he doesn't listen to anybody. He's completely unaware and clueless.
Right, and actually doesn't understand anything about human behaviour or other people or how to interact. Like, this is what I was saying. Like, the film has too friendly an opinion of its central character.
Yeah.
And actually, it needs to be a lot more critical.
Yes.
And I think, not needs to be. I mean, who am I going to say what it needs to be? But I think I would have enjoyed and found more interesting a film that had a much darker take on it.
Yeah.
That said, this was a mistake.
Yeah.
And
so
he's not a good person.
All in all, a failure. About
a failure that made us laugh quite a bit. Like, you can't deny that it had a bunch of good jokes and some good performances.
It has one great performance. I really want to underline that. I think James Franco is fantastic in this. But there's something very dispiriting about seeing a failed film about a failed film.
Well, so The Room, the whole thing about The Room is it's got stories behind it, and the mystery of who is Tommy Wiseau and where did he come from, and the whole story about how he got made. The Disaster Artist is a book initially written by Greg Sestero and someone else that this film is then based on. So the thing about The Room is it's all about the stories behind it, and it's like when they made The Disaster Artist, they wanted to have stories about how they made it. It's a project for a guy and his mates who like a bad movie, and it's been inflicted on the world
because it's James Franco.
Yeah,
but I can imagine how that role would have been an enticement. Actually, and he's so great in it.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, as I understand it, it's totally his project. I don't know that it was like brought to him. I think it's he said, "I want to do this."
Yes,
and you can tell.
Yeah,
it's
a vanity project about a vanity project.
Pretty much. And it's not quite as bad as The Room.
Yeah,
but it's close. It's a bit harsh, but because I did try and watch The Room in earnest. I was scared of watching The Room for a long time. Like, I think a lot of people seem to have this reaction. They see the poster, particularly the kind of half eye, the crazy look in Tommy Wiseau's face on that poster, and they go, "This is some kind of creepy horror movie." And like, it's in the film, they go on about how initially he thought maybe Johnny is vampire. Who knows? So I was kind of scared of watching it for a long time, not because I thought it would scare me, but just like, what is this?
Yes.
And then I finally get around to watching it, and I go, no, this is absolutely awful. Like, no one was kidding. This is rubbish. And I really can't sit through any of it. Like, it's not... I just skip to the bits that everyone knows. You know, there's the bit where they're in tuxedos for no reason. There's a bit where the mom says, or the grandmother says she's got cancer in this light-hearted tone of just like, I've got cancer, and then it never comes back in the rest of the film. There's a bit where a guy tries to kill another guy, and then, like, 4 seconds later it's forgotten and they're just friends again. There's the bit where he goes, you're tearing me apart, because it's straight out of Streetcar Named Desire.
No,
what about
not out of Streetcar Named Desire.
Sorry,
Rebel Without a Cause.
Rebel Without a Cause, sorry.
Which I was going to comment.
Yes.
Because it's Rebel Without a Cause has appeared twice, you know, in recent films, right? It's like...
What else was it in?
La La Land.
Okay.
Right? It's kind of where they go on a date and, you know, where like the credits appear over Emma's face and so on. You know, and I thought, oh my God, is like that film having a revival now? I would like... So lovely. If
there's just something about James Dean plays a part in this because they kind of vaguely idolise him. They go to pay pilgrimage or go to pay respects at the place where he died. There is something, but does it mean very much?
No, it doesn't. That's the problem with this film. You know, you're trying to latch on strands, right? And kind of they're not there really. You know. But you know, one of the things that drove me crazy and that I thought was absolutely typical of the film was in the conversations with James and Dave Franco, when you'd have the reverse shot on James Franco's face, you couldn't see his eyes. He was so badly lit. He lit his own brother so badly, you know, that in his close-ups, you can't see his eyes.
Oh, Dave Franco, you mean?
Yeah. You know, well, James Franco had lit his own brother so badly that you can't see his eyes. Right. So
I didn't pick up on that.
Well, I thought that was like part of the shoddiness and the egomaniacalness. Anyway, I'm glad I saw it because you know it
is just so plain.
Yes.
And exactly what you'd expect.
I think the only thing I'm taking away from this is James Franco's performance.
Yeah. It has nothing to say about the creative process. It has nothing to say about ambition. It has nothing to say about stardom. All these things that are wrapped up in this story, really, it should be, you know, kind of key themes.
Yes.
It just has nothing to say about them. It's just, let's tell the story of this film we like.
Okay, I think our two listeners have gotten those points already. Yeah. Okay, let's end now.